How does that make any sense, or how is that fair that you've got two prices on the same day? For me, I just don't understand it. Hi guys, how's it going? Before I get into this video, I just want to say thank you to everyone who reached out with some good wishes while I was a little bit under the weather recently. Suffered my first migraines for forever. Never had a migraine in 58 years, and yeah, it just knocked me for 6, and I did no running for about 4 days. Last week's mileage just tipped over about 20 odd kilometres. Really low mileage week. I'm much better now. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the entry procedure for the Melbourne and Gold Coast marathons, and also let you know that date for the Sydney Marathon, that World Marathon Major, on August 31 next year. The ballot for the general entries are opening really soon. I'll let you know what that date is and how long that entry period will remain open.
Whew, guys, wow. So I'll just stop here for a sec. I'm in Cairns and it's quite humid. I've ticked over just on 4K. I'll just pause my Garmin. But I just want to mention some brilliant Aussie runs at the Valencia Marathon just a few days ago now, last weekend. A couple of Australian Olympians, Andy Buchanan and Izzy Bat-Doyle. Andy Buchanan, new Australian marathon record, 2:06.22, shaving 69 seconds off Brett Robinson's former national record. And that time for Andy was a World Championship qualifier for Tokyo next year. So a huge run from Andy, and pre-race Andy did predict that an Aussie runner was close to running a 2:06 low, and yeah, you know, for him to deliver on a big race, big marathon, I think he was 22nd overall. Yeah, congratulations to Andy, that's a brilliant run. He was at Sunshine Coast last year. I've probably got a bit of footage here of Andy running at the Sunshine Coast half marathon last year at the Aussie Championships. I think he was second in that race, but he also won Melbourne half marathon this year, so he's in good form. And yeah, 2:06.22. It took a long time for Aussie runners to get back down under 2:10. Deke's record, Robert De Costella's record, stood for so long, and now we've got so many guys running so much quicker. Now, Brett Robinson obviously set a new national record. Liam Adams as well has also went under Deke's old mark. So, and we've got a lot of runners too knocking on that 2:10 door. Jack Rayner was a brilliant run at Melbourne this year. I think he went 2:11 and some change. But there's a whole host of other guys knocking on that door of 2:10. And Izzy Bat-Doyle, also a World Championship qualifying mark. She ran 2:22.59, placing her the third fastest female marathoner in Australia history. So she now sits behind Sinead Diver and Benita Willis. So that's a fantastic effort from her as well. And yeah, the Aussie women have been killing it in the marathon scene for a little while now, and that just really cements her place high up in the marathon ranks for women. And I think she finished 8th overall, so that was a fantastic result. And yeah, so it's good to see the Aussie marathoners kicking a few goals in some of those big races overseas. So congratulations again to Andy and Izzy, and yeah, look forward to them running in Tokyo next year at the World Championships. All right, I'm going to continue on with my run, finish off these last 4K. I'm just doing 8K. It is bloody humid, and yeah, the sweat is absolutely pouring out of me. All right, catch you in a little while.
I'll start with the Melbourne Marathon and its entry procedure. Last week, I was very fortunate that I got a half marathon entry, and Trish got her marathon entry as she's working towards becoming a Spartan. I think she's up to about 6 or 7, so she's got a few more to go before she gets to that goal of 10 Melbourne marathons to earn Spartan status. We were quite fortunate, didn't have too much difficulties with the registration procedure, but a lot of other people did. It's just got me thinking about why the organisers of the Melbourne Marathon went down this road. I did mention in previous videos that there were priority access for early entries for those people who had taken part in this year's Melbourne Marathon Festival 2024. But it turns out that that priority really didn't guarantee you an entry for 2025, and that's a little bit disappointing and a little bit unfair. Why give the priority access in the first place? Just to give it a little bit of background here, priority access was open from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. when entries did open, and then general entries were available from 2 p.m. onwards. But what was happening was that a lot of people who did register for that priority access just weren't able to access the site, and they were waiting several hours to get through. And by the time they did get through, the number of priority access entries had been capped. So they were no longer able to enter through the priority access, and they had to roll over into the general access. And what happened for many people that I did see on social media was that they missed out altogether. Now, I just don't see that as being a fair way of going about things. I know I've been banging on about the Melbourne Marathon for a couple of years and that congestion problem that they do have in the St Kilda Road area with the half marathoners and the marathoners coming back to the MCG. It's just something that they don't seem to be able to fix, or they just don't care about. And now we have this situation with the entries where a lot of people who thought the priority access would give them automatic or would guarantee them entry for 2025. It just wasn't the case. So I don't understand why we had the priority access in the first place and why that priority access was capped. I don't know, maybe you can shed some light on it for me, guys, down in the comments. The Melbourne Marathon sold out in the first day. A lot of people were disappointed with how the entries were handled. A lot of people were disappointed with the website, how it kept crashing. Surely there is a much fairer situation that we can come to so that everyone is on a level playing field. Just hopping back onto that congestion, I know it must be a difficult task to close streets in a big city like Melbourne on one day, let alone two. I know the Gold Coast, and I'll touch on the Gold Coast in a little while, has gone to 2 days over the last few years, and it's worked really well. Melbourne just don't seem to have entertained that idea at all. Maybe it's just logistically impossible because of those closing of the streets. Yeah, it just seems to be one problem after another with the Melbourne Marathon. We have the congestion there on St Kilda Road, and now we've got this entries debacle. I just think maybe this is something that the organisers will look at. Hopefully they will look at. For me, I think a fairer playing field would be that, okay, let's just go to a ballot system. Everyone goes into the ballot. Sure, still have your good for age qualifications, your elite category, of course, charity places and places for tour operators, but put everyone else in a general ballot and just make it a level playing field. I think that's all we're asking for. You know, if you miss out in the ballot, fair enough, but the way it is at the moment, where you think that you've got priority access and you really haven't, and then you try to get into general entries and you miss out completely, does really leave a sour taste in your mouth. Like I said, I'm really grateful that Trish and I were able to get in, but I really do feel for those people who have missed out. Moving on to the Gold Coast Marathon now, their entries opened this week. And again, it was a bit of a debacle with the entry system. I know that when I got on first thing at 9 a.m. to register for the marathon, the website crashed several times before I was able to get through, but I was one of the lucky ones and I was able to score an entry for the marathon. But many people were complaining about how long they had to wait, the amount of times that the website kept crashing. And I just don't understand why the Gold Coast Marathon organisers went with a Tier 1 and a Tier 2 category for entries. Tier 1 was $190, Tier 2 was $215. But what happened was that the Tier 1 category sold out super quick, and the Tier 2 kicked in on the same day. So you had the situation where some runners were paying $190 and other runners were paying, I think it's $215 through Tier 2 on the same day. How does that make any sense, or how is that fair that you've got two prices on the same day? For me, I just don't understand it. Was it a money grab from the Gold Coast Marathon, or are they just not reading the room of runners? I don't know, guys. What are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments. But I just don't understand why the Tier 1 and Tier 2. Obviously, it was Tier 1 was aimed at like an early bird entry, and Tier 2 was for, you know, general entries, I guess you could say. But as it turned out, they were both triggered on the same day. It just doesn't make sense. It's not fair. And I think a much fairer system would have been, okay, let's charge $200, $210, whatever it may be, and that's just it across the board. And when the places fill up, they fill up. I think that would be a lot fairer than charging two different prices that were triggered on the same day. Now, I'd never come across this tier system before for an entry to an event, but this showed up in my Facebook feed this week. This is from the Valencia Marathon for 2025. The only difference here is that with Valencia, they do show how many entries were being taken for each tier. The Gold Coast, there was no mention of numbers for tier 1 or tier 2, but as we do know now, the Gold Coast Marathon has sold out with 15,000 entries. And I think there's a few entries still open for international tour operators and charity spots. But the tier system, I still don't think it's a fair system. I think if you're paying more than a fellow runner on the same day, I just can't see how that is fair. But I guess because running is booming, events are being sold out so quickly, there's so much hype and anticipation from runners to get their entries in so quickly that yeah, it's really favouring organisers to be able to come up with this sort of entry scheduling, and I guess it's just something that we have to put up with from now on. Anyway, I'm not going to carry on about that, guys. If you were lucky enough to get an entry in either the Melbourne or the Gold Coast Marathon festivals, let me know down in the comments what event you did get into. Did you have some problems like many other people did with entering on the website? Were you one of the unlucky ones who missed out on gaining an entry for 2025? Let me know down in the comments. Don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan of the Gold Coast and Melbourne marathons. I've run sub 3 hour marathons in my 50s at both of those races. Both race days are well organised events. The Gold Coast weekend is a fantastic atmosphere, huge crowds. And the Melbourne Marathon, well, there's no greater buzz really than running into one of the great stadiums of the world, the MCG, the Melbourne Cricket Ground. I just think that the organisers for Gold Coast and Melbourne have let the runners down a little bit with their entry procedure for 2025. All right, let's talk about the Sydney Marathon now. And as you know, 2025, Sydney has been included as part of the Abbott World Marathon Majors. Entries for the Candidacy Club have already opened and closed. That was held late last month. That was for runners who took part over the past 3 years as Sydney was being judged as a candidate race for the Global Series. Let me know in the comments, guys, if you did get a start through the Candidacy Club. General entries for the ballot will open on Tuesday, December 10 at 10 a.m. Sydney time. They'll run through until December 30, closing at about midnight. We'll find out in early January the result of that ballot. I think it's around January 7 or 8, so we won't have long to wait after entries do close. I think Sydney's going to have 35,000 runners for 2025. Plenty of places there, guys, so fingers crossed that you get a start through the general ballot. I'm going to throw an entry in as well and just see what happens. And while I'm talking about the Sydney, Melbourne and Gold Coast marathons, what a shame it is that entries have opened for all these three, or the three biggest Australian marathons, just 3 or 4 weeks before Christmas. Now, it's a busy time for a lot of people. It's also an expensive time for a lot of people as well. And if you're contemplating running at all three events, let's just take the marathon for instance, and it is conceivable that you could run all three marathons in 2025. You've got from Gold Coast to Sydney, I think it's about 8 weeks, and then from Sydney to Melbourne is about 6 weeks. So with a good recovery, you definitely could run all three marathons. And if you did enter all three marathons, you're looking at something like about $630 just to enter those three marathons. And then you've also got, if you live out of town, you've got flights, you've got accommodation and all those sort of things. And then on top of that, you've got Christmas coming up. If you do recognise Christmas, it's quite a financial strain to, find all this money, have Christmas as well. I'm sure probably for next year, 2025, Sydney Marathon will probably have their entries opening a lot earlier than they have this year, because it wasn't until after the New York Marathon that we did find out that Sydney was being included as part of the World Marathon Majors. I think most of the World Marathon Majors open entries up pretty quickly after the race each year. Boston may be an exception there. I think they have theirs a few months later, but most of the others do open up within sort of a week or two of the event being held. So if that's the case, Sydney may have their entries opening up sort of September, October, which will just take away a little bit of that financial strain from being so close to Christmas. It's just not these three big Australian marathons either that are opening entries around this same time. We've got the Noosa Marathon Festival as well, which is held in late May. Their entries opened around the same time as Melbourne. It really does put a financial burden on people at this time of the year when they are planning their running events for 2025, because, you know, if you don't enter almost immediately, then you pretty much miss out, because running is just booming, as we all know, and entries for these events are just selling out in record time. It'd be nice if the organisers of some of these marathon weekends or marathon festivals could just maybe bring them forward a little bit and ease the financial pressure on a lot of people. I'm sure runners would be most thankful for that. Alright guys, that's it for this video. Really do appreciate it if you've made it all the way through to this stage of the video. Make sure you give it a thumbs up if you did enjoy it. It does really help with the analytics here on YouTube to share this video with new eyes. And if you're not a subscriber to the channel, I would really appreciate if you hit that subscribe button to help the channel out. That's about it for now. Take care, and I'll see you real soon.